now we're starting on Gantt charts and project network analysis. Let's see what this means. We have here, the phases of a project that we saw before. And I have to tell you, these phases aren't part of a typical Gantt chart. This is simply, me adding a bit of context around it. You have project conception, planning, execution, monitoring, and control. Now, here's the part that's actually a Gantt chart, which are these lines. And if you didn't know what these lines were, well, these are the start and ends of activities. You would have, a certain task at project conception, starting at time 0 and ending at time 1, which I guess is end of conception. You'd have one at, time, halfway through project conception all the way to project planning, and of course others. In other words, it's a visual representation of different activities and their duration, and it gives an additional information about whether they overlap. And indeed, if you are managing a project, this is important. This basically gives you your schedule. Okay, so on 1st of January, we started with project conception. It's going to last until 1st of February. On 15th of January until, middle of March, we're going to do the project planning, etc. So it tells you what to do at what time and whether you have certain things that overlap, which is also going to tell you, okay, so we have this activity that requires these workers. We have to get them done exactly now. We have to get them done exactly, on site at 15th of March at the latest, because otherwise it's not going to work. And we have this other set. They can wait a bit longer. We need these resources. We need these materials. And another thing, we need this first thing to be done before the next one. Well, that last thing, this first thing done before the next one, is what you'd actually use, the so-called program evaluation review technique, or critical path method, I know, very long acronyms, to do. So here we have something that kind of looked like our Gantt chart. Remember, it starts at a certain point 1 and it goes towards a point 2. So 1 and 2 in these examples are simply names. They could be, A and B, it's the same thing, they're simply names. A is the name of the duration between point 1 and point 2. So in this duration is 3. Maybe it's 3 weeks. I tend to use this, when planning for, yearly audits on, by using weeks rather than, something else, rather than, say, days or months. So we have activity A going from point 1 to point 2, lasting 3 weeks. And then, once you have completed the duration A and you've gone to point 2, well, it's going to take you another 3 weeks to get to point 3. Okay, so in all, to get from 1 to 3, point 1 to 3, it is taking us 3, that's from A, plus 3 from B, weeks to complete, our whole path. Now, we're going to add a bit of complexity here. We have another point 4. This is something we're trying to accomplish. We are trying to accomplish it to get to point 4. It's going to take 4 weeks. And finally, we have another path D, which lasts for 3 and is going to get us to point 3 as well. From point 2, it's branching out into point 5. It's very short. It lasts 1 week. And finally, to get back to our final product of 3, we have F, duration F, which is going to take 3. Let me try to conceptualize that a little bit. So you are starting your internal audit in point 1. You have a certain say preparing the risk assessment, which is going to last 3 weeks in A. Once you have prepared your risk assessment to get from 2 to kind of your final reporting in 3, well, you have some, audit work to do. Say C and D around point 4 might be preparing, the testing, whereas 5 might be some, initial planning with management. In any case, it can be different activities. It doesn't have to be internal audit. It can be a lot of different projects. But indeed, it gives you in a way of evaluating a project. And here's where it gets interesting. We have the concept of slack time. I'm going to make you look for, in this diagram, in this PERT, where you have slack time. Slack time is the amount of time a task can be delayed without increasing the overall project duration. So take a second and look at this overall diagram and tell me, where can we wait just a little bit? So that's going to be one of the letters, A, B, C, D, E, or F, which are synonymous with weeks of time, where in fact you could delay a certain activity, maybe get someone from that activity onto another one, and delay that activity by a little bit of time. Indeed, the activity that we can increase is between 2 and 3. It is duration B. We can add a slack time of 1, which would change B not from 3 but into 4. I'm going to introduce the idea of critical path. And again, I'm going to make you look for it. The critical path is the longest path for the project. And indeed, this is before slack time. We're not adding slack time yet. And I'd like to make you look for the critical path, the longest path for this particular project. Would you be able to tell me where that is? Indeed, for this particular project, there are 2 critical paths. We have one of them on C and D, and we have a second one on A, E, and F, both of the same duration, which is 7. And indeed, you will find your slack from what is basically not your critical path. Shortening this or these paths will decrease the overall duration of the project. And so we're going to talk a little about ways to actually, decrease that time.